1990, and then also for the further climate targets towards 2035, 40, 45, and at the last time the final goal in 50. So in February last year, a group of really knowledgeable economic people was set down in order to come with recommendation on how the agricultural sector could be taxed in Denmark. So their emission needed to go down. Therefore, we need in Denmark a tax for that to happen. So a tax on emissions from the agricultural sector. In this report, afforestation was described as an important element of the agricultural transition towards being more climate neutral. But in this report, climate was the only element of relevance. So no synergies at all, only climate. Then these recommendations went into the political negotiations called the Green Tripartite. And in June 2024, the final text was here. And here the afforestation continued to play a crucial role, but the focus of the value of the afforestation shifted from a climate perspective to now be more concerned towards water environment, groundwater protection, and nature and biodiversity. And then the final, so this was between the Land Farmers Association, the Danish Nature Conservation privately NGO, and the government. And then this agreement has to be political negotiated afterwards, and this was done by the 18th of November. So it has been quite a process to go to the final agreement, but at the end we have a large agreement with many different stakeholders agreeing on what should be in the text and how the agricultural sector should be transformed. Okay, so the main point of the agreement is that towards 2045, 250,000 hectares of afforestation needs to be done. 140,000 hectares of peatland, including the surrounding area, so 50-50, needs to be taken out of production towards 2030. Then there's support for other land conversions, wetlands and extensification, and then strategic land acquisitions as well, with the main purpose of nitrogen reduction and land distribution. And a total of 6 billion euros will be allocated for this transition, and then additional 1.5 billion euro from the Novo Nordisk Foundation. So there's a lot of money at stake here in order for this transition to happen. Okay, so what type of forest is in the agreement? So 150,000 hectares of the combined 250 is allocated for private afforestation with a production-orientated mindset. 80,000 hectares is to be privately untouched afforestation. So this is a new term in a Danish context. So this means that you get the subsidy for planting, and then you are not allowed to take out any wood from the area ever. So this is for nature and biodiversity. And then the last 20,000 hectares is allocated towards close to the cities and owned by the state, and also this untouched afforestation approach. And in Denmark, we have this the Danish Forest Act, which essentially states that this area is forest and it has to be forest forever. But you are allowed to manage the forest and take out wood, so on. So the Forest Act sets the main scene for how these afforestations is going to look like. Okay, so of the combined 6 billion euros, 3 billion of these are allocated for a subsidy for afforestation towards 2025. So it's going to be a state aid notified national subsidy scheme. So it has nothing to do with the EU cap funds and so on. This is a national scheme, and it will be established under this new agency called the Agency for Green Transition and Aqua Environment. So the subsidy for now will be a fixed subsidy of 10,000 euros per hectare, plus the additional annual subsidy, the hectare subsidy. I don't know if you have this in Iceland as well. Of the 10,000, 6,100 euro is to cover the cost of the afforestation itself. And then the 3,900 euro is to cover the income loss of taking out farmland and converted it into a forest. Yeah, so this is the new thing. Normally, or until now, the subsidy for afforestation in Denmark has been around 6,000 euros. So just to cover the cost of the afforestation. In order for the afforestation to really take pace, then they have added this income loss compensation for farmers to find the subsidy more attractive. So the question out in relation to the untouched. So optimal growth is not a part of the untouched forest areas. Here, nature and biodiversity is the main goal. So no production at all. So therefore, climate is set aside in order for reaching higher biodiversity levels more quickly, so to say. And yeah, you are not allowed to trim and manage the forest at any kind. Everything needs to be untouched. Yeah. Great question, because this untouched approach is a new term, and it makes no sense that you are able to make untouched afforestation, because, well, untouched forest you make in existing forest. But this is the term that they have used in this case. Yeah, but if you take this untouched afforestation approach, then you have the possibility of an additional 2,000 euros per hectare. But this is to cover the cost of no harvest forever. So the subsidy for the untouched forest it's a really bad subsidy. But for the others, it's better. But I will get into this a bit later. Then it's also stated in the agreement that we need a new law on nature and biodiversity, and here in 2025 the parties will discuss how this is going to be set, and also in relation to the definitions of protected nature and strictly protected nature. And this is in order for us to contribute to the common EU targets on nature and biodiversity. Yeah, and then these, all of this conversion needs to contribute to the target of minimum 20% protected and strictly protected nature in Denmark. And then there's also set aside money for further nature national parks, and also just nature parks in Denmark, and the existing ones are getting bigger. So this is a big agreement on restructuring of the combined or on the composition of the Danish landscape, where forest plays a really crucial role. For this to happen. Sorry. Okay, so this was the first part. briefly on the afforestation thing. Are there any questions on this? Yeah, Paul, please.
Yes, thanks. One of the first slides was you mentioned 50-50 surrounding areas. What is that?
So the 50-50 means that it's 70,000 hectares of peatland, and then the other 50%, the other 70,000 hectares, are the surrounding areas to where the peatland is. So we have different layers of peat in the grounds, and we want to take or they want to take them out with the highest emissions or the highest of carbon, and then they include the surrounding areas as well. So that's the 50-50. Yeah.
Another question, the second one was about the substitution price. What is the average or normal size of how to say land ownership in Denmark if it's private?
The size of the agricultural
yes, for one landowner, one farm. What is?
That's a good question. I would say I don't know. I don't know, but I think the general issue is that we are not going to get large afforestations on this. It's mainly going to be small areas, 5 to 10 hectares of land, which are going to be allocated to afforestation, because taking out too large areas does have a way too high cost for the agricultural sector. Yeah.
Thanks.
No worries. Other questions?
I think there was a question in the chat.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I touched upon that during the presentation. Yeah, but no wood are allowed to be taking out of the untouched afforestation. The minimum size requirement is 1 hectare. 1 hectare. Yeah. And then there was a hand.
Yeah. Hi, Mathias.
Hello.
Thanks for a nice, interesting talk until now, at least. Just a question about the subsidies. Have you, figured out how to pay them? Is it in the beginning of the period, and then annually if people have had farmland? So
yeah. It is a one-time payment. Yeah.
Okay.
But then you get the possibility of keeping the hectare subsidy. I don't know the English state, but the annually payment for what do we call it? Having agricultural land. It's an EU subsidy. So they combined the national subsidy scheme with the EU funds of the annual income on it. It's like 200-300 euros per hectare, right, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like the state is buying the land because the farmer is not allowed to use it for much in the future, or?
Well, they are allowed, but they are really making it hard for them to use specific areas.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
That the subsidy, okay, so credits. There were 2 questions. Do these subsidies also natural forest and the spread, therefore, of soily afforestation? So this is a tax on the agricultural sector, not the forest sector. So this is a main differentiation where so it's only afforestation and untouched afforestation and normal afforestation, so to speak. And then Raften, you have a question. Is it stated somewhere in the contract between Dansk Skovforening and landowners or from the institution that the subsidy prescribed acquisition of carbon credits in alignment with additional criteria? So this is a really interesting topic which I have been using a lot of time on, because essentially what has happened now is that the government has swiped away all additional arguments in Denmark for afforestation, on climate at least, not especially on the other synergies, and I will come back to this later. But on climate, we now have a subsidy so high that it's going to be hard to have the additionality argument that this climate benefit would not have happened anyway. Right? So we have now I'm going to switch to Danish kroner because I'm a bit more home to this, but we have 20 billion Danish kroner as set aside for afforestation. Do you have an additional effect of private financed carbon credits on afforestation in Denmark? Well, big certification schemes like Vera says no, or at least through EcoBase, if you know them. So additionality is definitely it's tough to argue. So carbon credits is out of the question for now. Even though some are still going to try to make them, but I would argue that the market will take a look what is happening in Denmark, and of course they are going to put their money where they have the biggest contribution. So therefore, afforestation is not going to be interesting due to the high subsidy. But we try to play in different roles where carbon credits would still be an important part of making this happen. But it's not happening for now. It's not happening for now. So I get no, that would not be possible. No, you cannot. The question in the chat. So if I get the subsidy in DECO for afforestation, can I sell carbon credits in the future for the same piece of land? The answer is no. You would also have to register the land from the start. So if you were able to find a certification scheme which would allow, afforestation taking place with such a high subsidy, but I have not heard of a subsidy scheme or a carbon credit scheme which would allow that. Okay. More questions? Then I will show you some slides. I will just skip. I made a bit of a mistake in the setup of the presentation, but what I will show you now is an analysis that we have made, so as I mentioned in the start, in the economics task was to calculate for climate benefit only. Then they took afforestation into the negotiations where the forest should help reaching water environment goals, ground protection, groundwater protection, and nature and biodiversity. So the assumptions of the calculations changed, right? First, it's only climate. The forest doesn't care where it's planted. It will generate a climate benefit. But if we want to have the other synergies, then we need to place the forest specific places, right? Okay. So what we tried to do was calculate where can we get the synergies we want with the subsidy as it is now. And this is how they calculate the subsidy. So in Denmark, we have 2.5 million hectares of agricultural land. we want 250,000 hectares of afforestation. So they found out what was the cultivation value of hectare number 250,000, and they made the subsidy right for this hectare. This means that we will get all of the underlying hectares as well, because they will in principle be overcompensated for their loss of making the afforestation on their land. So this is the theory behind what's tricky now, because where is the nitrogen, where is the groundwater protection needed to be, and where is nature and biodiversity perspectives? If we do this in a good way, this would be the optimal place to make the afforestation. But as we see, this is outside of the scope where the afforestation subsidy is calculated to be. So we will not get the afforestation in the optimal areas, so to speak. So we made the University of Copenhagen making some analysis of where do we have a need for making something for nitrogen, where do we need to set in order to protect groundwater, and where do we have proximity to nature, right? These are the three main elements that the green tripartite wants the forest to help with. And then we find the underlying cultivation value of these areas where we want them to be. We find 250,000 hectares. These are the most optimal areas for now to make afforestation. But here comes the trick. These are the cultivation values of the 250 hectares of afforestation, of areas in Denmark where afforestation will be optimal placed. And as we see down in the left bottom corner, only 21,400 hectares have a cultivation value which is under or exactly the same as the subsidy for now has been calculated to, right? So what this means is that we will only get, and only this is in citation because we will get synergies other places as well, but in theory, we will only get the synergy effect we want on 21,400 hectares in Denmark with the subsidy as it is right now. This doesn't mean that we won't get 250,000 hectares of afforestation. This just means that the synergies will lack on the rest of the, well, what is this, 230,000 hectares of afforestation. Does this make sense? This is a really, really crucial point and a really, really, problem in this new afforestation scheme. Because if we don't raise the afforestation in the right places, the agricultural sector will need to take out even more land combined, right? Because there will still be a need to protect groundwater. There will still be a need to do things in the area with nitrogen leakage, and there will still be a need to do nature protection or untouched afforestation in areas with high nature value. So, yeah. This is a really crucial element and a problem with the new afforestation scheme, as it shifted from the economic climate perspective towards the synergies in the political agreement. But this is what can be done, because as I told you, 22 billion has been set aside in the agreement to afforestation. These are the they are not publicly available, but I will share these slides with you afterwards. But so what we did was we took the graph from before and divided it into 10 categories of hectares up, and we found the marginal cultivation value, and then we could calculate with the same method as it has been done now, the need for income loss compensation. And what we see is that, of course, as the higher the cultivation value you get, the more income loss you need. So the afforestation cost is fixed. It costs the same wherever you make the afforestation. So what we can differentiate on is the income loss, this part. So for now, it's in Danish kroner, it's 500 kroner per hectare. And these total numbers is what the subsidy needs to be in order to get to the hectares where we get the synergies we want. I hope this makes sense. It's a bit complicated in but please raise your hand if you have a question. But here we see that for the allocated 22 billion, we could almost get 175,000 hectares of afforestation, which are primarily located afforestation, which increase the synergies effect that we all want in Denmark. That's actually quite interesting. But this would mean that we differentiate the subsidy among landowners. So not every landowner will get the same because of the different cultivation values. This is an element that we work a lot with in our daily political work, because we see this model as the main model for reaching high afforestation numbers. We need the subsidy to go up, at least for some people, right? Okay, so this was a quick run through of an analysis on the agreement. Are there any questions? Please. So if you are in Iceland, you want to have, I don't know if you have, synergies beneath the ground the same way as we have in Denmark. You might not, I don't know. But I think this is a really important part of making the forest contribute with as much value as possible for the allocated funds. Yeah, Gunnar.
Hi, thanks for a very informative presentation. Just the questions there on the funding and required for this. Obviously, this is a massive undertaking, and as I understand, this is being paid by the Danish government or the Danish taxpayer.
Taxpayers, yeah.
Yeah. So is there, I guess there's a couple of questions here, but is there like, let's say, on the political spectrum, understanding about this and consensus is one thing, and is it tied to, Denmark's NDC and the overall kind of big climate goals? Is it definitely something that everyone's aware of, that this contributes to that?
Yeah,
that's the one question, and so on the consensus side, and then the other may be, and I think this has been alluded to in some of the questions in the chat. So basically, the engagement from the private sector is mostly done then through grants such as Novo Nordisk. So there's not really a play for Danish companies to participate in this through their own kind of climate targets and such.
So to take the last one first, there is, if they go out and buy the land themselves, right? Then they can still count everything in their scope it and say that they own it, they management, they could use it in their ESG or CSRD or whatever they have. But the whole climate credit perspective, it will be much harder to see how this is going to work, because why should they fund as such high state-funded climate target, or what to say, right? It doesn't make any sense, so to speak.
Yeah, sure.
And yes, the The problem in relation to reaching synergies, it is known by the government. And it's also stated in the text that it is to start with a fixed subsidy. And the way I read this is that it is possible to differentiate the subsidy eventually if we figure out how to, so to speak. So there is room for this kind of an approach. And yes, it's definitely tied up to NDCs, and especially in the long term. Denmark wants to be carbon neutral in 2045 and then 110% in 50. And the forest perspective here is definitely to reach the 2025 and especially the 2050 goal, where we need a lot of uptake and storage. Yeah. So it is definitely contributing to the LULUCF. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
No worries. Would a total shelter belt at the total size of 1 hectare fall under this scheme, as well as other forms of agroforestry? So this has nothing to do with agroforestry at all. This is normal afforestation, so to speak. So please elaborate if this doesn't answer your question. Yeah. Okay. So the last slides I have is in relation.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So the answer to the shelter belt is not counted in it. Is it correct? The other one, the agroforest, is probably by grazing grazing the forest.
Yeah, so there is, on the side, they are looking at this nature and biodiversity law, and this also moves into the Forest Act, where they want to take a look on the possibility of more forest grazing. But this is only in a perspective of nature and biodiversity.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah. So not in a agroforestry. Of course, you could argue that there are definitely overlaps and synergies, but the main focus is biodiversity and nature, not agricultural farming, so to speak, in an agroforestry system. No.
Mm-hmm.
But sorry, but nevertheless, when you have agroforestry like shelter belt, the idea is not only to provide shelter for the agricultural land, but it's also to enhance biodiversity, to enhance the soil.
Mm-hmm.
So is that completely left out in this scheme, or is it possible for me to get a subsidy if I have an agricultural land and I want to plant up or build up shelter belt that would collectively form at least 1 hectare of land?
So if you have 1 hectare of land, then you can apply for the subsidy on making afforestation within the law of the Danish Forest Act. But you're not allowed to have animals in this area for the first many years because they want the forest to grow, right? But eventually there might. Sorry? No, please.
But you could use it for other kinds of agriculture, right? Agricultural practices, right? Let's say if you're just growing vegetables.
No, you cannot do that.
Also not. Okay.
So this is, we are really in a silo thinking way here. There's not much synergies to these kind of systems. But agroforestry is not that widespread in Denmark. So that's the other thing. Is there any common practice of wanting to do this? I don't think so. But yeah. Okay. So the final slides is on the Danish LULUCF sector, and this is more like a general view on how the LULUCF sector works. I don't know if it's if it's too informative and if you already know this, but yeah, should I present them, Shinu, or what do you think? You know, it's the slides that was sent out with the invitation.
You think it's too complicated?
No, I don't think so. But
No.
Okay. So do you want to hear it?
Definitely.
Okay. But so the slides are still in Danish. I was not able to convert them into English, but I know that you Icelandic people, you know some Danish, but yeah, I'm sorry for this. But so the national emissions report, right? So we are obliged under the EU and FN to make annual emissions of all our greenhouse gas emissions and uptake. So these are the general practices, methods under the IPCC, as well as you use them in Iceland. And in Denmark, we have the University of Aarhus, who makes the combined data set, but with incorporation of many different suppliers of data. In Denmark, we now in these days we await the newest reporting. So the numbers I will show you is 1 year old. But as you know, we get two main what do we call it, products. We get a common reporting format. Now it's actually called a common reporting table, and then we get the national inventory report with all of the methods. So we do we do 5 elements in the combined emission over Denmark. So we have the energy sector, we have the industrial process, we have the agricultural sector, the LULUCF sector, and the garbage sector. The LULUCF sector, right? We have forest, we have cropland, grassland, wet areas, cities, other land, harvested wood product, and other LULUCF. In Denmark, we don't have other land and other LULUCF, but I know that you have these areas in Iceland. Okay, but what this essentially means is that every square inch of Denmark is categorized with something, right? Everything has an activity data, so how much do we have of one thing, and this can be calculated with an emission factor of how much this either emits or take up. And this is especially what makes the LULUCF special towards the other sectors. It is that in the LULUCF sector, we both have an uptake of carbon and an emission. So all of the other sectors, for now, they only emit. We don't have any working BECCS or DACs or anything else. It's only the forest and the harvested wood product which generate an uptake into the national emission accounting. Okay, and how do we estimate these fluxes? This is done through valuing the carbon stock in the forest and the difference between 2 years of the stock. So this is the main method on how to calculate the forest's climate benefit into the national accounting. And these are very large sources of uptake and emissions, and therefore, it's good practice to make common recalculations and make sure that these uncertainties are revisited all the time in order for making them as precise as possible. And yeah, so there's definitely some considerations in the LULUCF sector between, do we just want to max out in standing carbon and thereby have no emissions, or do we want to continue having a long-term uptake at the same time as we produce wood? So this is like the counter benefits in the LULUCF sector. And then there can be natural effects, droughts, fires, storms, and so on, which can make huge spikes in the overall LULUCF. But there are mechanisms which can take care of this in the accounting. Okay, so in Denmark we estimate the carbon stock on a model tier 3 base. Some argue that it's more like a tier 2, but we are relatively high on the tier level. And this is done on the basis of the National Forest Index, the NFI. And everything living, biomass above and underground, dead leaves, branches, the layer of litter in the soil and mineral soils of organic material is combined to the total carbon stock in the forest, right? And then if we combine 1 year with another year, we find the difference between the 2 years, and we see how much the forest have benefited into the national accounting. So every reduction in the forest carbon pool is calculated as an emission, despite how the wood is being used as a start, right? So this means that biomass has an emission factor of 0 in the energy sector in order for not making double counting of the emission. This is a really important point in why biomass is counted carbon neutral, so to speak. But biomass is not carbon neutral. It does emit carbon when we burn biomass, but it has an emission factor of 0. This is something totally else. And this is where many people make mistakes in how to claim biomass. But this is the good thing about the LULUCF sector, that we have accounted for the emission when the wood has been taken out of the forest. This is a good thing. The same means with a more long-lasting product, it has been accounted for. Thereby, we can send the product into the other sectors without them being calculated as an emission. This is essentially, in a climate perspective, what gives wood a great climate benefit when we talk about it in relation to national accounting. This is This is another way of thinking how forests contribute to the overall green transition. But of course, there is a substitution effect of using wood in the other sectors. But if the substitution effect is indirectly accounted for in the other sectors when they are using wood, because they are not calculated an emission when using wood, right? Therefore, it's attractive in the other sectors to use wood. This is also a very, many people argue that we need to account for the substitution effect within the forest sector or the LULUCF sector for that matter. But if we do that, we take away the possibility for us to account it in the other, for the other sectors to account it as with an emission factor of 0. And thereby we take away the benefit of wood, so to speak, and keep it in our own sector. So my argument will always be that it's definitely better for us to calculate the emission in the LULUCF sector for us to be able to send the wood into the other sectors with an emission factor of 0. But so using wood in the other sectors definitely safe for fossil carbon being used. This is a very important point as well, and we need to stress this argument all the time. But this doesn't mean that we have to account it. It's two very different things, and there's a thin line of miscommunication here. But yeah, and these are the numbers in tons carbon saved for 1 ton carbon wood used in different parts of construction, and everything above 0 wood is the best use, right? So even burning coal and gas even though the climate benefit is small, it is still better, right? Yeah. Okay. I'll just have a sip of water. Okay, so these are the numbers of the harvested wood product pool in the Danish accounting. So of the combined harvest in Denmark, 50.5% goes directly to biomass energy. So this is all the thinnings and damaged wood from final harvesting and so on. 7.7% goes to firewood. 35% of the conifers go into some sort of wood materials, and 7%, 6.8% of broadleaves go into this kind of wood as well. So when we then work with the final 42%, half of this goes to waste when cutting up the wood. Therefore, the assumption is that 20% of the combined harvest goes into the harvested wood product pool in Denmark, right? And then it goes into these 3 different levels. And since we don't have any paper production in Denmark, 0%, that's energy is heat and power. Thank you. And brænde is firewood for, your stove at home, or what do we call it? Yeah. So we have these half times of construction buildings, construction wood of 35 years, and then for plates and wood plates and so on for 25 years. So these are the fixed half times from the IPCC. Yeah. Okay. So this is the last year's combined look of carbon CO2 equivalents per hectare, so to speak. No worries. Bye. So we have a brutto gross increment of 10.2 tons per hectare, right? Of those 10.2 tons, we harvest 4.8 tons. Windthrow takes 0.2 tons. Dead wood is 1.1 ton. And then there's 1.1 that we can't account for. Therefore, there's a total removal of 7.2 tons. This gives us a net increment of 2.9. These 2.9 is what we can account in the national accounting, right? This is what is being stored within the LULUCF sector on this given year. So this is also a very important thing. So it is true when people say forests grow 10 tons per year, they do, but we take away a lot of as well. At least when we look at it as a combined sector. And this leads us to the Danish an overview of the Danish LULUCF sector. And as we see, the forest has contributed with a net sink since 1990, and since 2007 it has been very much deviated from year to year with higher and lower net uptake. So right now we are here in time. What we expect over the coming years is that the net sink will decrease. So this means that we have a lot of mature beech, sitka, and red spruce in the Danish forests, which are going to be harvested, thereby being emitted from the LULUCF sector. And therefore, the forest has a lower uptake than previous. Not an emission, a lower uptake, a lower net sink This is also a common mistake in communicating that the forest is going to emit more, but the forest doesn't emit, in Denmark at least. They have a lower net sink. There's very different approaches to this. But then afterwards, we see that the sink again will increase to around 3 million tons. So this is without the 250,000 hectares of afforestation, because this is the previous prediction of how the forest is going to contribute to the LULUCF sector. So the 250,000 hectares needs to be added onto this. But again, we won't get much climate benefit of the new afforestation in these years in the near future. But on the long term, we expect additional 1.7 million tons of uptake in 2045 from this new afforestation. So we have a combined LULUCF sector, which over time will, combined reach a zero, hopefully. Yeah, not the forest. The forest will always contribute with a high net sink, but the combined LULUCF will go to around zero. And the emissions from cropland and grassland, those are the peat areas. Yeah. Raffen, you have raised your hands.
Yeah, thanks. Question about the lower growth. Is it also because you're changing species from Norway spruce or other faster growing to broadleaves, or?
No.
No.
It's not. It's just, the assumption is actually that there will be replanted the same species which were there before.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah. Raffen? Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me? So sorry for going back a little bit into the middle of your presentation, but I would really like to get a better understanding of how the cultivation value is determined.
Mm-hmm.
So am I correct in assuming that the methodology behind the subsidy scheme is based on calculating the cultivation value as like a aggregated or combined monetary benefit of all carbon sequestration, obviously, but also improvements to groundwater, reduction in nitrogen leaching, and benefits associated with the proximity to nature? Is it an aggregated figure?
No, not at all. The marginal cultivation cost is what you have left from production of the hectare when without the annual subsidy from the EU. So it's your what do you call it? In Denmark we call it dækningsbidrag. I don't know the English term, but when everything has been paid, then you have made 700 Danish kroner on this hectare of land from your production. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
So there isn't here any payment for the synergies.
Okay.
This is strictly a way of compensate the landowner for the loss of annual income. And then in an economics perspective, then you have to take this income loss and invest it in order to get a return the same as what you have lost. So so they say if you invest the income loss, then you will annually get the lost cultivation cost. That's the argument behind. So eventually you don't actually lose any economic yearly income. You devaluate the ground's worth, because you set aside, you plant forest on it, and you can never take it back to agricultural land, but you can generate, you can keep the yearly income with the way the subsidy has been made. If you have an hectare with such a low conservation income, marginal conservation cost. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I thought you were looking at this from another perspective, but this perspective also makes sense. And
so this is the method that the economics people have used in order to calculate the subsidy, right? So this is their way of approaching this problem. How do we get 250,000 hectares of afforestation in Denmark? We allocate the afforestation for these specific areas because it's going to make, in an economic perspective, more sense to take the subsidy than making farm, continuing making the farm. But the problem is that the government want the other synergies as well. And this is where it gets tricky, right? Because we are not getting the synergies on these hectares, so to speak. Yeah. Thank you. Were there another hand? Oh, time is running.
Yeah, thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I have two questions. Number one, which species will be in focus for this 250,000 hectares? And number two, what is the class other LULUCF?
What is what? The last question.
The other LULUCF class. What is defining that?
Also, the LULUCF class is the different definitions in relation to FAO and other, broad definition on what is a forest. In Denmark, it's 0.5 of a hectare with high stemmed and a crown cover. That's a forest in Denmark. So this area will go under the forest definition of forest land. Does it make sense?
Yeah, this class, which in the most right on the screen, are the LULUCF class.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. But what about the first question, the focus species?
Yeah, you're allowed to plant whatever you want. There's no, differentiating between broadleaves and conifers. It's up to the farmer themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. So when you talk about synergies in your presentation, are you referring to sea sequestration, improved soil health, and water management? So when I talk about synergies, I'm talking about the other synergies than the climate effect, because the climate effect is implicit calculated in what we are getting for the subsidy. So what we are not getting for the subsidy is the water environment improvement, the groundwater protection, and the proximity to nature or biodiversity aspects. So when I talk about synergies, it's these three other parameters. I mean, climate benefit we are getting anyways. So yeah. Okay. More questions? I don't have more slides.
maybe because no one is raising their hand, and I want to use your time because this is so interesting. The synergies, again, coming to that, were they so in the graph where you showed the GIS map of the synergies and where they are placed in the country, were they taken and assigned a value that is based in monetary value of those synergies, or is the value based in something else?
The value is only based on the cultivation value.
Is that the monetary value?
Yeah. So this is the value which has been monitored by the university over the last 5 years, and is the average on what has been the income of this specific hectare. But it doesn't represent alternative cultivation actions, or what you can do with your area other than afforestation. So you might be able to get an even higher cultivation value if you change crop, for example, or So there's many faults in the way that this has been calculated, but it's the best practice that there's available in order to do this. Because if you had to consider every alternative management of the land, you will not be able to, make the calculation. So it's the past 5 years, an average of the cultivation value of the past 5 years to this year, and then the subsidy has been calculated. Yeah. No, it was the other way. So this is just our analysis taking a look on where the synergies are located. So we see that there are definitely some areas which are more suited for afforestation, and then we combine these 3 layers to find the best areas for the subsidy. So I have 5 minutes left before I need to leave. Yeah. So these are the cultivation values, and as you can see over here, you have, so the subsidy has been calculated for the first part here, so to speak. So, it's 712 Danish kroner, right? Yeah. So therefore, there's a lot of areas where the subsidy are not very attractive. All of these down here. So that's why we have a problem. That's why we have a problem. And that's why many people are not wanting to take the subsidy, because they lose way too much money, even though the tax is coming. Yeah.
One question in the end. Are you gonna make a report or something of this project or this?
Well, we might. What do you mean?
Is it something that will be available for us to read about?
No, not specifically. The problem with this analysis is that it finds some very specific areas, and we don't, as an association, we don't want to decide what needs to be placed at very specific areas. So therefore, we are not going out with some of these maps that you have seen. We will come out with the different analysis and the problems behind making a fixed subsidy instead of a differentiated subsidy. But we are never going to be the one saying it has to be right here if the subsidy is not ready for it, so to speak. So we are going to work for a differentiated subsidy in order to get more land available for afforestation and increasing the synergy effects. But we are never going to say it has to be right there, because we don't like that when people say that on our members' areas as well. Yeah. Okay.
I think we need to get to have you over to visit Iceland someday.
Yeah.
Actually, we have been talking about it, but we'll see how it goes. Definitely. But this is definitely a good startup for that.
Great, it would be a pleasure.
And if people have want to contact you, that's no problem, isn't it?
It's fine. I'm very busy, but I will try to get back to you as soon as possible if you write me. But please, please reach out if you have any questions. Or I will gladly answer. Yeah. All right. Very well.
No further questions? Oh,
Perfect.
thank you so much for having us.
Welcome. It was a pleasure. And see you eventually.
Exactly. See you.
Great. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
No worries.